This is a message to Chief Commissioner of Police, Victoria Police Shane Patton, and the Attorney General, Jill Hennessy. I'm speaking tonight from a deep window of concern. We've really reached the peak point of corruption in this nation. The proposed bill that has been passed, unfortunately, in the Legislative Assembly is beyond belief. It is so repugnant, so repulsive, and so in contradiction with many, many laws, our Constitution and human rights. It's reached a point of, in my opinion, peak corruption. We have a proposal to switch off the rest of the Act, which is deeply unconstitutional, so that it can be legitimised that authorised officers who are not just people who enforce the directions from the Chief Health Officer, they are people who actually can themselves make these directions. This has gone from people who are qualified, people who are skilled and qualified in either medical practice or alternatively highly qualified individuals who have very similar types of qualifications, to an assessment by the Secretary, a arbitrary assessment of skills and attributes and experience that could extend that authority to police officers, PSOs, and other workplace inspectors. This is not just about a shortage of skilled individuals. We have quite a lot of qualified individuals here. We most certainly haven't run out of doctors, or perhaps they've run out of doctors that agree with them, as we've seen with the 630 doctors. But this is about police state. This is about where public health merges with the police state. And to me, this is an indicator of where we've come to. This is an utter and deep disgrace that you could go from saying a surgeon that can perform surgery can now have the surgery performed by a plumber using the plumbing tools, basically. And that's how they conceive of the intelligence of people. Now let's look at what these doctor cops, what can these doctor cops do? It's contemplated that doctor cops and PSOs could be appointed as authorised officers. This will allow them to use reasonable force to enforce compliance with directions, enter premises to investigate non-compliance with directions without a warrant, and allow them to ask people their name, address, and other information. The illegalities of this statement and the illegalities of these powers have to be understood in the context of what you can and what you can't do. Clearly, Chief Commissioner Shano, doesn't seem to know how the Crimes Act works, doesn't seem to know how the Public Health and Wellbeing Act works. In fact, nobody knows. The magistrates don't know too, because they're handing out warrants left, right and centre. The Public Health and Wellbeing Act sets up compliance in terms of what happens and what effectively can a breach of a direction lead to. Section 203 is very clear. It sets a upper limit of 120 penalty points for a person who breaches or refuses to comply with the direction, and 600 penalty units if you're a body corporate. That is now the upper limit. That means this is not an indictable offence or a summary offence. It simply means that it establishes that under the guidelines of the Infringement Act, where it becomes a fine or an infringement, and you need to carry through those processes in the court. They don't attract a conviction, they don't attract a summary offence, and most certainly you cannot issue warrants or arrest or charge individuals on those bases. You can only fine individuals. So indeed, Shano has been encouraging, let's use a better word, truly he's been inciting his officers to commit indictable offences on the good public, on the good Victorians, by pursuing them, by actually pursuing them for criminal indictable offences when you can't incite for a breach of a public health directive, because the directive is not an indictable offence. It's not one that is about sexual offending, murdering, sexually abusing people. Let's remember what incitement is for. So you have Jill Hennessy, Attorney General, imbuing in these police officers more powers than she can under the law, because you can't. There's an upper limit to what can be done. And the police officers, meanwhile, and the magistrates are signing away and coming after people for incitement offences, which are serious under the law. Section 321G is extremely serious. Let's continue what Julie has to say. What does Julie has to say? Well, Julie seems to think that these amendments will allow a person to be detained under the existing emergency detention. And the designated authorised officer reasonably believes a person is likely to do or refuse or fail to do. That's amazing. Now we've got Dr. Psychic Cops. So Dr. Psychic Cops can not only just issue directives, they can also psychically determine the future. In fact, she follows it up by the following. Well, she's a real smart girl, this one. Although these terms do involve an authorised officer making an assessment or prediction of future behaviour, I consider the criteria for that assessment are sufficiently clear as to avoid the power being exercised arbitrarily. Are you kidding me? I also note that the courts have accepted the use of protective detention powers. Yes, that's for sexual offenders. Oh, she says it here. Other circumstances where an assessment is required of future risks, such as under the preventative detention regimes for serious sexual offenders. I see. Organising a peaceful vigil for suicide, as in one of my clients, is akin to incitement for serious sexual offending. What a disgrace. What a disgrace. You've all run out of criminals, is that right, Chief Commissioner? You've run out of criminals, Jill Hennessy. You're equating breaches under the public health and well-being as equating to that. And what do you define as the high-risk individual? You don't even have proper definitions under the law. You call them in terms of diagnosed with COVID-19. Well, we know the RT-PCR tests are inconclusive. We know you're dealing with the laboratories under false pretexts where there's a false positive is not reported. So what is diagnosed with COVID-19? What is the definition of that? And secondly, close contact of a person. You don't even have that defined under the law. And you're telling me that a police officer can make those assessments, brilliant, and equate them to serious sexual offending. Well, Shano, I'll tell you who's guilty of incitement here. Section 321G is very serious, Shano. Very serious, my friend. And we've got magistrates just signing off incitement. They're not even looking at incitement of what? Of rape. Soliciting sexual offending against children. Violence against women. That's right, Shano. Dino, Assistant Commissioner Dino. You've run out of boys in the count of violence extremism to pick on. Isn't that right? Muslim boys, you no longer want to pick on them anymore. No more terrorism. You're going to use your counter violence extremism unit to go hunt down some COVID-19 breaches using the Crimes Act that you have no power to use under these circumstances. And Julie's just given you powers, more powers that she didn't have to give you. No powers, niente. Just ask Peter Dutton. He's the one that introduced the ASIO Act, saying only if you protest where the protest can lead to violence. So you're telling me my client who's holding a candle or encouraging a vigil for suicides in this country, you're bringing the police on him, harassing him, the magistrate's signing off on incitement charges. You've scared the bejesus out of him, false imprisonment, malicious prosecution. Have you run out of sexual offenders? Jill, you've run out of sexual offenders. I can give you a whole list, my friends, as can a lot of people. Whole list of offenders and pedophiles and perpetrators and institutional abusers in this country. But unfortunately, it may, just may, include your names. Enough. If this sees the light of day, we have a claim, not just against you, Jill Hennessy. This is disgraceful. You've got no powers to give to police officers. And Shano, withdraw all of your charges that you brought against anyone for incitement offences in anything under the Public Health and Wellbeing Act. It is unlawful, my friend. It is disgraceful and unlawful. And people, you just sit and take it. Who are your officers, Shano? Who are your officers? Who are these clowns that you're bringing in? Stormtroopers. Are they official? Are they official? What's their badge numbers? Knocking on people's door, 5 cops, 5 detectives dagging people. And pedophilia is running rampant in this country. Perpetrators threatening women. And no consequences. With your boys club, people lifting up the phone with, Assistant Commissioner Dino. Oh no, nothing wrong with our cops. They're great. They support family violence. But no, you're going to have 5 detectives turn up and tag people. It's a disgrace. This is a disgrace. And if the Legislative Council passes it, truly, it's a disgrace on all levels, and we will rise as people. We will rise to stop this mania. We need to stop this mania.